This is Bolivia, Political Crossroads, where we give a rundown and analysis of the developments in Bolivia's political landscape, starting with the controversial general elections held October 20th of 2019, which sparked a 3-week-long nationwide protest that eventually led to the resignation of ex-President Evo Morales. We'll continue following the developments through the new elections projected to be held in April 2020. Your hosts for this podcast are Ernesto Machicao and Paul Rackner. Ernesto, a La Paz native residing in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, is an experienced lawyer and political analyst who in the past has also participated actively in Bolivian politics. Paul, that be me, is an American-born Bolivian with a background in Latin American studies and also resides in Santa Cruz. We hope you enjoy listening, and we encourage you to share with others who you think may be interested, and also appreciate your comments, suggestions, and any feedback you may have. This is Bolivia Political Crossroads. We're on episode 4. Thanks for listening. We're going to start off today talking about Evo Morales' adventure in Mexico. As most of you, I'm sure, know, after resigning, Evo Morales was picked up by a Mexican Air Force airplane in the Chapare region and flown off to Mexico, where he spent, if I'm not mistaken, just about a month.
Right.
And I'm not so sure it went that well for him there.
And then he left. But he never said goodbye.
No, he didn't.
Terrible.
That didn't look good for him when the same, what was the guy's name? Ebrard, right? The Secretary of Foreign Affairs, I guess you'd call him.
Uh-huh.
Who personally, he was the first Mexican official to publicly make any kind of statement when Evo was in trouble, right? About Mexico being willing to grant asylum and host Evo and other party members. And when he arrived, he was met personally at the whatever airstrip they landed at, and in a handshake. He even put a hand on his cheek, which is very intimate, if you will. It seems like he was very well received. And in the end, he left. The same secretary made in an interview said that, he basically left without saying goodbye. And just more recently, I saw an article in the paper that apparently he wrote a letter, basically a thank you note, which I think is it's a pretty lousy way to express your gratitude when, as Abel himself says, they saved his life. And,
right.
Not even a phone call or, hey,
right.
nothing previous to his departure.
Oh, absolutely. There are two things I think to point out from my point of view. One is I had never seen before anybody that sought for asylum and was sent an airplane to pick him up. I had never seen that.
Mm-hmm.
The laws of asylum or refugee laws don't mention that. Of course, it's not mentioned there. What is usually foreseen in the law, in any country's law, or in the international treaties, is that people who seek asylum reach the point of the asylum. They go
right
all the way to the country and they knock the door and they say, I want to get into this country because I'm being persecuted and I'm looking for asylum, or otherwise, which is more prevalent in the Latin American political scenery, is you go to the embassy. Yeah, to the embassy of the country, and then you seek asylum, and they open the door, and then you are in the territory of that country, which opened the door to you at its embassy in that place. But I had never heard of anybody having an airplane come all the way from I don't know how many miles away, but that's a big statement. Mexico really wanted this guy. They really loved Evo Morales. It's a declaration of not only of political alignment, it's a declaration of love, because too much of an issue for somebody, I think. And they really had a big trouble because, as we mentioned in our first program, they couldn't get into the country with the Mexican airplane because they didn't have the permission to get into Bolivia, and then they couldn't get out of the country because the other countries would not allow the airplane to fly over their territory. So it was a whole big issue. And then the pilot was given honors in Mexico because of the hero he was such a hero.
I didn't hear about that one.
Oh yes, he was given a medal by the president of the country because he really acted as a hero in all this thing, you know. So I had never seen something like that given upon somebody that was seeking asylum. You know, this is something to me historic. I had seen some asylum seekers in the past, important seeking asylums. You know, as for example, the more important ones in Latin America recently. It's Alan Garcia from Peru. He seeked asylum in the Colombian embassy in Lima, and he remained in the Colombian embassy in Lima for years, I think, you know, until it prospered. And many decades back, there was another Peruvian leader that also sought asylum in the Colombian embassy in Lima, and he stayed in that embassy for 4 years. But Colombia never sent an airplane, and 4 years, you know. But the WikiLeaks guy stayed many years too, right?
Assange, he was almost a decade, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was a long time.
Yes, he was going nuts. And, you know, the people from Ecuador were saying this guy is crazy. Well, how can not he be crazy? You know, anybody that is subjected to being in a little place like that for so many years can go nuts. Of course, you know, the guy was riding a tricycle, I think, when he was. This is true. I don't know how you call those in English, but it's monopatin, you know, and like yeah,
I know what you're talking. A scooter, yeah, like the little
scooter. He was
a razor scooter, something like that.
He was raising a scooter in there, you know. This is true because the images are there in the internet, you know, and of course this is too many years subjected to in a little space, you know. But see, these are these are funny things, you know, but the funny happenings, but they took place, you know. Assange and these other fellows from Peru, they were years in an embassy. Well, Evo Morales didn't have to go to that trouble. All he had to go is go to the Chapare and wait for his airplane to come from Mexico. This was a big honor from Mexico. There's no question about that.
Yeah, it's a spectacle within itself. There's something to mention there. I remember I didn't see the interview. I saw some comments about it, the interview with Tuto Quiroga, where apparently he, behind the scenes, negotiated, at least this is my understanding, he negotiated that whole play that they were going to allow that airplane into Bolivian airspace and to get Evo out based on some kind of condition. I think it might have been allowing the line of succession and having the mass senators allowing that or approving that, right? which eventually did happen. I don't think it happened as quickly and easily as, you know, if that was a straightforward deal, it should have been easier, but it did eventually happen, and which I think was actually a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah,
so
this is true. Mm-hmm.
There had to be something.
The Mexicans really did a good job with him. You know, they were very nice to Evo Morales, and he was absolutely a bad guy with them. You know, terrible guy. You know, and the second thing they did, which is also very important, is that he spoke politics all the time, and even though it was not the scene was not like in Argentina, where basically in Argentina they're allowing him to speak politics, even though they did not state it like this, so clearly the fact that he could speak politics, they never prohibited him. You know, he could just speak about that. You know, he
was never discouraged.
Right, he was never discouraged. You know, and he just spoke politics all the time. And this is terrible because under the international treaties, you're not supposed to do that. You know, you're not supposed to allow that to an asaylee. Why? Because basically you're confronting in this case, Mexico to Bolivia. The Mexican government allowing Evo Morales to speak about the government of Bolivia is confronting the Bolivian government.
Yeah, it's generating friction.
Yeah, that's not allowed to be done, you know. And even though some lawyers in Mexico were into the niceties, you know, he's an asaylee, he can do this, but if he was a refugee, it wouldn't be allowed or whatever. It doesn't. Those are two niceties that are too intricate to be accounted for. Basically, the global picture is that Mexico cannot confront the government of Bolivia. They want to have Evo Morales, they can have him, but in silence, right. And the same is for Argentina. He goes to Argentina and now he's the chief of the campaign, the manager of the campaign of the MAS in Argentina, and nobody says anything. Nobody says anything. They encourage him they applaud, and they have all these meetings in the streets, and he comes out in the backyard and speaks to all these people. And no, this is terrible. Argentinians are not measuring the damage they're doing in our relationship between Bolivia and Argentina, because we basically live
our neighbors, our next door neighbors.
Yeah, our next door neighbors are very important for us, and for them too. But it appears that for the government of Argentina, it's much more important, the relationship with Evo Morales than with Bolivia as a country, They encourage him. It's a terrible thing, and they're breaking all laws, all international laws. That's not how it should be conducted. They are saying that in Argentina, the law is different, and that this guy can do these political manifestations if he's a refugee, but not if he's an asaylee. Niceties that are not understood even by a lawyer, and niceties that are not relevant to this, because the whole point is a whole different issue. Bolivia cannot be confronted with Argentina because of a guy that is in asylum there. It's like what happened with a guy that's in asylum in Russia. Remember?
Snowden? Yeah.
What's his name?
Ed Snowden, the guy, the whistleblower.
Right, the whistleblower. He's there, but he's quiet. If Russia all of a sudden would let him,
not necessarily. That's a totally different topic. But I listened to. Did you listen to that interview on the? I always promise I'm not going to mention Joe Rogan podcast on mine, but there was a 3-hour interview with him, and he's I don't know. I don't follow that whole deal too much with Snowden, but apparently he's not that quiet. In the perception that everybody has that Russia is an authoritarian state that suppresses free speech and all that. He's actually pretty much speaks his mind pretty clearly, and he's certainly not sympathetic to the Russian government. But anyway, that's a totally different topic. Sorry,
but he doesn't speak against the U.S., or does he?
Sure he does.
That's the point.
Sure he does. I mean, he's not, being incendiary or inciting violence, as one could argue Evo Morales has been doing.
Right.
But he's definitely still a critic. That's for sure. In Evo's case, one thing I wanted to go back to real quick on the case of Mexico, just kind of as in closure, there is why were they so open to having him there and having him run his mouth? It sounds kind of, I don't know, I don't want to use the wrong words, but running his mouth, because I mean, he really wasn't delicate or diplomatic in any way in terms of the public statements he was making. I have a good friend in Mexico that I was talking to about this, and he said, what's going on here is that the president is dealing with two crisis right now politically. Or one is when they had the son of the Chapo Guzman,
right?
They had him detained. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had to release him. The military forces were overtaken or overcome or overwhelmed by the cartel, the cartel bad guys, and they had to release him because they were just massacring people in the middle of a town in Culiacan, and that was terrible for the country and for López Obrador. Right. And I don't know if it was right before that or right after that. There was also a case of a family. I think it was like in a Mormon, what do you call this? Like a community. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the last name of the family, but the whole family was just massacred, kids and all. And and so they were reeling from the backlash of those two instances, tragedy that certainly didn't make López Obrador's government look good, and so it was a distraction tactic. What can we do what can we do to get people to forget about this and move on to something else? Yeah, and so that was a good distraction. I think that's a pretty fair pretty fair theory, and certainly makes sense.
Yeah,
But
and it probably makes sense in Argentina too, because they're facing an economic crisis, which is terrible.
oh yeah,
Terrible, yeah. So if they have somebody that's speaking absurd things like Evo Morales, and everybody's listening to all these absurd things, then of course, the Argentinian government that doesn't any longer have the political problem of its devaluation and now its political economic crisis. Now the whole point is the circus that they have made with Evo Morales. And of course, yeah, I can understand that too. But still, in terms of international law, this is wrong. It's not supposed to work that way. Even whatever explanation they have, they shouldn't do this. And the whole issue is that Bolivia should be very mad, and they should really bring this case to the OAS or something, because at some point, I think they will, because basically what they're allowing is this guy, which is being persecuted by the law in Bolivia, is doing whatever he wants in Argentina, and he's the manager of the country.
He's running his party, and they've even named him as campaign coordinator or something like that, right. From abroad, which is just. Right.
No, this is
it seems pretty ludicrous. I'll totally agree with you on that.
Especially because Evo Morales has the power to divide the country. He's not a politician that speaks out. If this would be a smaller personality, it probably wouldn't be as important. But Evo Morales really has half or something like that of the people that support him. So whenever he speaks, especially if he's promoting violence, people listen to him. His people, his followers go out to the streets and dance.
Yeah, we saw plenty of that right after his resignation.
So that's the effect of his words. His words have immediate effect. So that's the reason why he was initiated a legal criminal proceeding in Bolivia. This is very recent because he spoke from Mexico to Bolivia to El Chapare. And he was promoting violence. He was promoting that his followers do not send food to the big cities and have all the people starve and all this stuff. So in Bolivian, the ministry of the public ministry in Bolivia initiated a legal process, and now they have issued a warrant in order to have him come and declare in these proceedings. It's an arrest warrant, actually, So this is new.
Since just a couple of days ago. Since I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday that was issued. Right. And they even I don't know how it works with Interpol, but it's been sent or presented to the Interpol headquarters, which is in France, I guess. I didn't know that, but we'll see where that goes, because at least publicly so far, what I've been seeing in Argentina is they said they're not going to play ball or cooperate in any aspect on that. And if there's a request for extradition, and with an Interpol, what do you call that, alert? Mm-hmm. I don't know legally what the implications are there if there's an international arrest warrant and the Argentinian government, knows where he is. I don't think it's any secret. And they don't cooperate. I don't know. I have no idea what the laws are there.
Yeah. I'll
go ahead
to give my word on this. If they seek for him in Argentina, the Argentinian law, the Argentinian government can say that he's under asylum and he's under the protection of an asylum treaty.
But wait a minute. But he's a refugee, right? He changed his status right after he landed. What's
it's the same thing. It's the same thing. They are not obligated to release him, because see, there's a fine difference here, and I hope I can make myself well understood. If you're being politically persecuted, you can seek asylum, and a different country can give you asylum because you're you're being persecuted because of your political ideas. Okay. Mm-hmm. But, and this is very important, but if you go out and kill a guy in the corner of your house and seek asylum, they shouldn't give you asylum because that's not
Right.
yeah, you're not being persecuted because of your political ideas. You're being persecuted because you killed a guy in the corner.
He committed a crime.
Right. That's the whole thing, you know. So here, the issue of Evo Morales in Argentina is overlapping. It's not clear.
Mm-hmm.
You cut a cheese, you know, because the argument in order to accept him as an asaylee or a refugee is because he's being persecuted politically. That he can argue. As you know, these arguments are very generalistic in their contents, you know. He can argue that he's being politically persecuted and that he needs asylum, yes. But once there is a criminal process against Evo Morales with proof, or at least alleged proof, or preemptive proof that he has committed the crime, because that has been taped. There is a tape that where him saying all those stuff, you know. Then this is not necessarily political persecution. It's criminal persecution. You are following this guy. You want this guy apprehended because he committed a crime, not because you don't like him politically or you disagree with his policies. You're after him because he committed a crime against the citizens of Bolivia. It's a whole different issue. So that should bring about a discussion in Argentina when the Bolivian government actually formally asks for him being sent to Bolivia. The discussion will take place in Argentina. And I'm not sure whether in Argentina this is going to be a big discussion. It should be a big discussion, legal discussion and political discussion, because one thing is political asylum for a person that is being persecuted for his ideas. A whole different issue is to give somebody that has broken the law, nothing else but the law, and as a criminal, political asylum. Political asylum is not for criminals. It's for politicians that are being persecuted for his ideas. Yeah.
You're definitely definitely a very clear explanation, and it makes perfect sense. Just in case anybody's listening to this for the first time, or to our podcast for the first time, and they haven't heard the previous ones, or they're not keeping up on the local news in Bolivia, because what we're talking about here right now with this conversation that was recorded, real briefly, was just a recording of a conversation over on the speakerphone of a Cocalero leader who was speaking with Evo Morales directly over the phone about, basically how to run proper road blockades and cut off ground transport between different cities and communities. And he specifically stated that we don't even let food through, which is definitely a criminal act, cutting off a food supply to any population. So just wanted to give a quick resume or a quick summary of that, in case anybody wasn't sure what the deal was with the criminal act that Evo was being accused of. So go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, but that's the whole explanation I wanted to provide in terms of the persecution issue, And I think that the point was made. He is persecuted politically. Yes, according to the Argentinian government, he is. That's why he was given asylum. But now he's persecuted exclusively for a legal issue, And I wonder if they consider that political. That's a big debate. It should be a big debate in Argentina. Let's see. That's coming, and that will take place probably in 2 weeks or a month, because the Bolivian government has to formally ask for his release, for his coming into Bolivia. Yeah, that will be in the agenda in the next in a month. It'll happen, definitely.
Something we haven't talked much about, and now that I'm thinking about this, and we're talking about the asylum seekers that go into the embassies, and maybe going off topic a little bit here, but there has been a little bit news lately about two people in particular that are sitting, living in the Mexican embassy in La Paz, Juan Ramon Quintana and Wilma Alanoca, I think is her last name, who was the vice minister of tourism or something like that. In those instances, I don't know what the name is for a salvoconducto in English, but basically it's a free pass, right? To move freely outside the country, or to leave the country. The MAS was trying to negotiate salvoconductos for all their party members and for basically anybody involved in anything, any of the violence or criminal acts that took place before, during, and after the resignation of Morales. What do you think is going to happen there with that? Have you heard anything new about that?
Salvoconducto. I'm looking at a dictionary here, which is a legal dictionary.
Oh, okay.
Let's look for a translation of that. I don't know if it is, but it says safe conduct, official document conveying the holder the privilege of safety from arrest. Salvoconducto. Yeah, that's a very literal translation. Official document conveying the holder the privilege of safely from arrest or safe conduct. Yeah. I think your definition was probably closer to the reality, because it's not necessarily for arrest. Well, it is in a way, but it's usually salvoconducto. Well, let's pick up this definition, because the more I think about it, it makes sense on the subject that we're speaking about right now. Okay. Because why do people go into an embassy? Because they're going to be arrested, right? They're being persecuted. Yeah. So because they suppose that they're being chased in order to be arrested, they go into an embassy in order not to be arrested. So they need to get out of the embassy and go to an airport in order to flee the country legally. And in order to make the transit from the embassy to the airport, they need a document in order not to be arrested, because if they just take a taxi drive, they're out of bounds.
Yeah, we can look at Assange and see that he never obtained that.
That's the point. I think the comparison is good with Assange. Why was Assange not given this safe conduct? For the same reason that the Bolivian government is not giving the safe conduct to De La Quintana. Exactly the same reason. Both governments, the government of Bolivia in this case, is not persuaded that Mr. Quintana is being chased because he is a politician, because of his political position, because his political views. The Bolivian government is arguing that Mr. De La Quintana has to go to court because he has committed crimes in Bolivia that have nothing to do with politics, just crimes as dry as that. And this was the same thing with Assange. When they wanted his safe conduct, they told the government of the British government told the Ecuadorian government that this was not a political thing, that he had pending his presentation in a legal proceedings in Sweden, I think.
There was like a sexual harassment.
Right.
Case,
it was I think it was Sweden, right?
Or sexual assault or sexual harassment.
Which has nothing to do with political issues, right? Nothing to do with WikiLeaks. He's just, they argued that he was just somebody that broke the law in a sexual assault, So that's the reason they never issued one, because they said, no, this is not a political persecution. He has to go to Sweden in order to respond to these accusations, and the legal system in Sweden has the right to listen to grab him, take him to Sweden court and listen to what he has to say about this accusation. Same thing. They're not giving him the safe conduct because of that, because they consider that he has broken the Bolivian law, and it has nothing to do with political persecution. As you can tell, there's a fine difference here, a very thin line that crosses what is and what is not political persecution. On this issue, my perception is that, especially in the case of Quintana, the argument can be easily made that he's being followed or persecuted because of exclusively because of legal issues, not political issues. In the case of Evo Morales, it's much clearer that he's a politician and he talks all the time, and it's more a political thing. But again, there is a process now, and it's a legal process. He committed a crime purportedly. But that's the issue. That's why they don't give him, they're not issuing this safe conduct to him. Because if it would only be a political issue, the Bolivian government is obliged to give the safe conduct. Yeah. They couldn't say no. The Bolivian government would be breaking international law if he would not issue the salvoconducto.
I think it's even clearer with Alanoca, right? Because she basically got caught red-handed producing. She had a Molotov cocktail factory in her
exactly.
office, pretty much literally.
That's a good example, right? Nobody knows her,
But,
nobody knows who she is. She's not a politician, a well-known politician, but basically she did that. She did what you're saying, that's a crime. So why give her this look to when she just committed crimes and believe it's simple crimes,
what puzzles me there is why the Mexican government hasn't given her up. I guess she's not. I don't want to say she's a big fish, but in such a clear-cut case as that, and she's definitely, she doesn't have the same high profile as Quintana or Evo Morales or any of the upper crust of the MAS, right? But that seems kind of strange to me. I don't know.
You're touching a good issue. That's an important point. The Mexican government is taking Evo Morales' story as true, and according, they just believe him everything that he says, and if they say Alanoca is being politically persecuted, they take it as a true statement. They're not questioning anything. They're not analyzing. Under international law, every case of an asaylee seeker has to be analyzed independently, not as a group. They go one by one and they say, is Evo Morales, shall he be given the protection of the Mexican government? And then they go through a test, and see if it's true or not true, and then say, okay, issue him an asylum, whatever, asylum resolution, and they should go like that, case by case. But apparently that's something that the Mexican government has not done, or at least we don't know that they have done, because as you well mentioned, she's not known here as a politician, and basically she committed a crime, but the Mexican government is protecting her also. Yeah, I know these are big issues of discussion, but they're interesting issues of discussion. And that's something that should be analyzed more by the formal media. The formal media does not delve into these issues too much because they're hard. They require more research, and they require a little bit more expertise than most of the media have at their hand, at their disposal. They would have to hire somebody that knows about these issues or pay somebody, and they don't do that. Basically, that's what you don't see the discussion, but it is an important discussion, as you well mentioned and point out the case of Ms. Alanoca. Yeah, she doesn't deserve asylum, but then again, it's a discussion, but it's a discussion in legal terms, and it should be discussed and then decided. But apparently, Mexicans are not doing that. They're just everybody that Evo Morales says deserves asylum, they give him asylum. Yeah, which is unfair, totally. That's not international law. That's international politics.
Well put.
That's basically Evo Morales in Mexico and Argentina. I think we have, I don't know if we covered everything about it, but I think we covered important topics about it. Yeah. Oh, one last thing. This is not law. This is politics, He's having a great time in Argentina. I mean, Evo, he has supporters that I never imagined that he would have. The number of people. It's not just Bolivians, If it would be just Bolivians, I wouldn't be so surprised, because most of the people Bolivians that are in Argentina are poor people. That's a truism, And most of them are from an Aymara extraction or Quechua extraction. Right. That's true also, that's, I don't see that as abnormal, that a majority of them are backing him up. But, what really surprises me is I see all these Argentinian pretty girls in the streets, Evo. Come on, they don't know half of the story. They don't know a quarter of the story, But it's just like they're Evo fans because it has become is that a fan, something to do, something that's in right now. Evo is in Argentina, and people support him.
It's identifying a figure with a certain political ideology that you're aligned with, and it's like Che Guevara, if in the same sense that he's an image, or he represents an ideology, and people don't, at least those that are supporting him currently, really aren't interested in the facts, at least of the recent events. And I think that's what it comes down to. I can't find another explanation. I've had a couple. I try to stay off of Facebook and Twitter and get into arguments with people. And the only time I've really gotten into a back and forth with somebody, well, actually, one of two times was with a guy from Argentina, and I could not reason with him, on any level. You present straightforward facts, and he just ignore them, or it was like I didn't mention those things. So I think it comes down to a recurring theme here lately, and it's something that we talked about before, is that in cases like these, political ideology trumps fact for a lot of people. And I can't find another explanation for it, So yeah, he's definitely having a good time. He's getting a lot more support. He's going out in public, and he's, in Mexico, he was getting booed and
Yep.
people interrupting his invitations to speak universities and such. Where in Argentina, he's definitely not dealing. At least that I haven't seen any reports of anything of that nature. He's having a good time, and I think he feels good to be closer to home. And I guess that leads into another question: is with the upcoming elections and people, they got to start. They've got to name a candidate, the Mas Party. How effective do you think Evo can be in directing a campaign in his party from Argentina? And what do you think is going to happen with that?
Oh, I think he can be very effective. Of course, Evo is not going to get into the details of the campaign, but if he goes to the press, I don't know, twice a week or 3 times a week with a message, that is going to be a big campaign, and people are going to listen. Right now, there's no campaign, and everybody has tuned Argentina in order to see what Evo has to say today. This is no campaign time. This is just Christmas time, and nobody is interesting about what Carlos Mesa will say. He has nothing to say, apparently, and whenever he opens his mouth, it's just like, okay, he's speaking, let's see what he has to say, but nobody has any eager desire to listen to Carlos Mesa.
Nobody's waiting for what's coming next.
No. I see a little bit more interest when Pumari comes out and speaks, but after what happened, not so much. That has diminished a lot too. And definitely, Camacho also, people listen to him, but nobody's eager to
yeah, people will become disenchanted with Pumachi. I keep screwing up their last names. Pumari and Camacho. They become disenchanted because I think it was a surprise to everybody just how quickly they started playing dirty politics.
Right.
After the role that they played. And
so what's left? It's Evo. So everybody listens.
The Evo show.
Yeah. So where are the news coming from? Buenos Aires, and this is not campaign. Just wait until there's an official campaign. Definitely, everybody is going to be listening, the radio stations and the channels, TV stations from Buenos Aires, because that's going to be our new political mecca in Bolivia. It's no longer going to be in La Paz. It's not going to be in Santa Cruz. It's going to be in Buenos Aires or in the north in Oran, where he says he's going to go. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I don't even know how that's going to work because, we've already said it, that the Argentinian government really isn't interested in respecting, the treaties and basically the rules internationally about asylum and refugee status and letting Evo act politically. But a whole other thing is, running a campaign from a foreign country. I don't know if there's international law that prohibits something like that. I mean, one thing is making political statements. Another thing is influencing presidential elections. It's like I said, there should be some kind of legal recourse, or I don't know. It just doesn't seem right to me that Argentina could the Argentinian government could take this so lightly, regardless of whether they're more politically aligned with Evo than with the opposition at this point. And another thing is, you said he can be very effective, but in the end, I think a lot of what it comes down to in a political campaign is money, and the MAS does not have the central bank at their behest anymore in terms of, I mean, they don't, I don't know how they're going to fund the campaign. They don't have the state funds. Go ahead.
Well, this is something that it's hard to prove it, but it's almost a statement was made like 3 days ago. There was a consul in the city of Oran, which is the city in which Evo Morales is going to reside, supposedly. I don't believe too much in that. He's going to live in Oran.
After this happened, he said he's not going to stay in Oran. So, and I'm sure that he said that he made that clear on purpose after what happened. But go ahead. Right. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, but the issue is still there. This guy in Oran was arrested with 8 kilograms of drugs of cocaine.
In the trunk of his car.
Cocaine from the Chapare, of course, from Bolivia, because all the cocaine that goes to the north of Argentina goes from Bolivia. It doesn't go from Colombia. It's Bolivian drug. So the thing is that yes, the guy was an ex-consular agent that was put into what's the word I'm looking for? It was an ex-consular agent that was put in office as the consul under Evo Morales' government, right? Right. And Evo Morales chose Oran as the city where he was going to live in Argentina. And from Oran, he was going to manage the whole campaign in Bolivia. So now he decided not to do it. But this is the reason why he decided not to do it. It's like a confession, If it would have nothing to do with him, it's a confession. I'm not going there because they're going to say that I'm working with drug money. Yes, you're working with drug money. That's why you're saying you don't want to go there, because this guy was close to you, the consul, the former consul, and he was caught with 8 kilograms of cocaine, and that's where they're financing their activities now. And basically that's what's happening. I know that it's somewhat irresponsible to say these things as I'm saying them, because I have no proof. But, I've reached the point in my life where, I had it enough, to try to prove that everything that I say has to have a document or a picture or some video, But basically what happens in El Chapare is drug making, because all the coca leaves from El Chapare are basically for drugs. You cannot chew that.
Yeah, they're not fit for illicit consumption. So,
all the coca that's made there is for drugs. And now, how is the equation? The equation that the people from the MAS are trying to make us believe is that all these people grow this coca, and then they don't produce drug. What they do is they sell it. They sell it to whom? For the production of what? Nobody says that. But basically, they sell it for somebody that's going to make drugs. And some people in the Chapare make drugs too. So basically, the whole idea, they don't have the central bank, but they have the central production of cocaine in South America, and I have no doubt about that to this point. So they're going to finance that with that money, which is another issue. It's hard to prove it in a court. I don't know if there's a court that is willing to prove that, because it could be burnt in 3 minutes. But it has to be said by some irresponsible guy, and that's me. It happens. This is what's happening in Bolivia.
Well, it'd be interesting to see some kind of, I don't know, the campaign finance reform, if such a thing ever existed or could exist in Bolivia. I don't think it'd be a crazy or a bad idea for the current government to try to put in place certain laws to oversee where campaign financing is coming from. Because really, like you said, you don't have any proof, but I mean, who really thinks that the guy selling pineapple is financing the MAS,
Right.
Where else where are they getting donations from? And the answer is pretty obvious.
Right. The answer is very obvious. In fact, Paul, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about writing an article about this. who governed in the last 14 years? Basically, the Chapare. What is the Chapare? It's the drug factory of Bolivia. Those people, the rich people from the Chapare, are the ones who ran politics, the mass, ran the country. Who is opposing them now? Camacho. Who is Camacho? Camacho is the Comité Cívico de Santa Cruz. What's the Comité Cívico de Santa Cruz? Basically, the Comité Cívico de Santa Cruz has always been the political instrument of the big enterprise people in Santa Cruz, now of Bolivia, because Santa Cruz has become the economic leader of Bolivia. So it's basically, the confrontation. It's almost a natural confrontation. It's the entrepreneurs in the drug area from the Chapare versus the entrepreneurs of the legal business in Santa Cruz, who are being confronted in this whole process. The mass representing the business people from the Chapare and the drug cartels, and the people from Santa Cruz representing the big companies of Bolivia, which are the legal companies that manage today big business in Santa Cruz and in Bolivia. Basically, that's the confrontation, and I think that's healthy to see that, because there's no too much ideology here. Basically, there are two groups here of big interests that want to govern this country. And those are the two groups, in my opinion, at least. This can be debated. Of course, it can be debated, but I see two very powerful groups in Bolivia that had come up to the political scenery, and those are the two groups that I see clearly. The Chapare entrepreneurs, the Chapare business people, and the Santa Cruz business people, confronted through Evo Morales, and the other guys confronting through Camacho.
That reminds me of something I just saw. I saw a picture on Facebook of a protester with a sign yesterday that said something to the effect of 6,000 coca growers in the Chapare are not going to decide the future for my future in Bolivia, or something like that. But the other side of it, like you just said, is, what's the other huge interest group here, or the major interest group is the Santa Cruz business sector. And a question that, people really need to ask themselves as well is, there's a lot of rhetoric out there about that we need the DEA back in Bolivia, and that the drug trade is the worst thing that can happen to our country, and this and that. Where at the same time, if anybody's really honest with themselves, if I asked you, if you could have a magic wand that you just shook it once and you did away with drug trafficking in Bolivia in a matter of seconds, would you shake that wand? What would happen to Bolivia? That's a question that needs to be taken seriously.
Yeah. I think the question is valid. It won't happen. If it would happen, there would be a crisis in Bolivia, an economic crisis. But it's your example. You posed a good example at the beginning of this conversation when you mentioned the case of the imprisonment and immediate release of the son of Chapo Guzman in Mexico. What are we talking about? Mexico is a big country. In Latin America, one of the three big countries, Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina, are our daddies in this part of the world. And, one of our daddies cannot have a bad boy in jail, because it's impossible for that. Once this was like when it just happened, I was watching CNN, and Del Rincon was there. Del Rincon is a Mexican, and he was having an interview with other two or three guys from Mexico, and one of the experts, which was I don't know if he was a politician or an analyst of politics, said, no Mexican with a tint of reality would oppose this. He said no Mexican with a logical reasoning can oppose what happened in Mexico. And Del Rincon jumped in his seat. He said, "Well, I'm one Mexican that seems to have some kind of logic, but I'm against this. I don't think that he
set him off."
Yeah, but Del Rincon again. He doesn't live in Mexico. He doesn't feel what is being taking place there. And I can see the point of the Mexicans, come on, these are two powerful people. And if these powerful people are in jail, Mexico can come in flames, just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of people can die because the son of the Chapo Guzman has been caught there, What to do? Is it better to release him, or is it better to have him in jail, although 1,000 or 2,000 people can die in the streets of Mexico? I don't know. This is a moral question that has to be evaluated in Mexico and in the world, And it's something similar to your question with regard to Bolivia, I don't know, the economy of Bolivia, how much of it rests upon the drug business? Probably a lot. I don't know what the percentage is, but probably it is a very insignificant part of
it's
business.
Definitely very high and higher than other, higher in percentage than for other drug producers like Peru and Colombia. I think proportionally it's much higher.
Yeah, because the economy is much smaller. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, the economy is small. Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah, we talked about this. So again, it is very important. But the question is a fair question. But I would also take the question to a wider level. Why don't they do this in the world? Why do we have all these campaigns ever since when? The 70s, just say no to drugs and so on and so forth. The drug cartels, the drug business has not become less. It has become more. Ever since the Reagan era, which was the main era in the fight against drugs, Nancy Reagan came out with this phrase that, I just mentioned a while ago, just say no to drugs and all that stuff. This was in the Reagan. After Reagan, it continued all the time. It continued. The world became engaged in all this. Europeans got engaged in all this. And what is happening? Are we just like Mexicans? And I think we are as humanity. As the community of nations. We know drugs are bad. We know our youth is suffering from drugs, but we're not fighting really drugs. We are not fighting really drugs. This is just a political fight. It's nice to say we're fighting drugs, but really in reality, nothing is happening. It's growing. The business has grown. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but there was an interview, or I don't know if it was an interview or something I saw with Carlos Mesa the other day where, and again, it's one of these things you keep seeing on Facebook over and over. Oh, the DEA needs to come back to Bolivia. And he said very directly that, no, I don't think the DEA does need to come back to Bolivia. And I don't know if he's just, making a political move or if he's actually, using, I don't want to say common sense, but he's certainly not just falling into line with that rhetoric that I don't think does the country any favors to just blindly accept that. Whether the DA should have, at a certain level, a presence here or not, then, that's, I don't know. I don't want to give an opinion on that, but I mean, it really surprised me to see him publicly say that. And I think that's, it's an awakening, if you will, for a lot of people that, it's a reality that needs to be confronted in politically and in reality.
I think these people, and when I say these people, I define these people as Evo Morales, the leaders of Cuba, the Castro brothers, the Castro Raul, and all the leaders that are right now managing and administering Cuba. Same goes for the Venezuelan leaders and also the people from Nicaragua, and somewhat for the people in Ecuador. This is a moral issue that deserves much more in-depth analysis, because when you say, should the DA come to Bolivia? I would say yes, but after it goes to the U.S. Yes, because, there is so much drugs inside the U.S. These drugs are produced in Colombia and Peru and in Bolivia, but they are distributed inside the United States. We have all these movies and TV series and Netflix stories about Chapo Guzman and Pablo Escobar and all these guys. These are the producers. These are the guys that make the money producing, and then they enter those drugs into the United States market, and they're distributed
Mhm.
inside the U.S. And somebody is distributing the drugs inside the U.S. And I'm sure just because of common sense, this distributing
Mhm.
is not done by Chapo Guzman. It would be hard for him to distribute it in Chicago, New York, Miami,
Yeah.
local California. No, he doesn't do that. He's
Although
not.
I have seen some news that the Mexican cartels in particular, well, yeah, the Mexican cartels are actually starting to gain quite a presence inside the United States.
Yeah,
Um,
starting. I think that's important.
yeah.
They're starting. But, this business has been going on for decades in the U.S. And there have to be big cartels in the U.S. which are not known to the public. They just work underneath, and they're distributing all these drugs every day in all big cities in all the U.S. It's taking place. The drugs don't walk by themselves. That's definitely true.
No,
And
no.
I don't think that the Colombian cartels in the 80s distributed inside the U.S. Impossible. Well, they couldn't do that. They would be killed before they go into New York and they distributing all that drug. It's hard because they have their own drug guys in those cities. They have drug lords in every big city of the U.S. I'm sure of that. That's how
Mhm.
it has worked always. But, the DA is not in the U.S. Again. And I think, this analysis that we're doing right now, which I think has some validity to it in itself, is probably the analysis that these guys from the left do. And they say, if why shouldn't we work with drugs? Just remember, the case in the this was in the 80s, when the civil wars were going on in Central America and the Iran Contra deal. Remember the Iran Contra
Mhm.
deal, right? Yeah. Well, what was found there? That drugs from drug trafficking were financing Iran
Financing. Yeah.
because they couldn't allot them money through the legal proceedings in the U.S. budget.
Right.
That was found out. There was a whole political and legal issue about that. But there it is. So drugs are big money, and where there's big money, there's a lot of power and power and politics and drugs and power go hand by hand, and they can permeate almost any society in the world. And I think they do permeate any society in the world. And in my opinion, they permeated a big country, Mexico. How could they
Mhm.
not permeate Bolivia? That's just obvious. And like you say, the percentage of the economic portion of drugs in Bolivia has to be very big. Yep.
Yeah. Um, Moving on to, well, we're talking about, how effective can Evo be in a campaign and what's going to happen and how is it going to be financed. One thing we haven't talked too much about really at all is the potential candidates that the MAS have. The names that are being thrown around are Andrónico Rodriguez. Rodriguez is his last name. For some reason, I always have a problem with that.
That's correct.
His first name is not so hard to forget. He who is the vice president of the Cocalero syndicate in Chapare under Evo. He's 29 or 30 years old, very young. We've got Arce, the former what is it, the economic minister.
Right.
We have Choquehuanca, David Choquehuanca, who's been out of politics for a while, but he's still definitely a mass loyalist. And the fourth one, there were four that I remember: Andrónico, Arce, Choquehuanca, and Diego Party, who was the I guess you call him the foreign minister under
Right.
Evo. For me, all signs are pointing to Andrónico, and I don't know. Him with Arce, maybe. We have to talk about there's going to be a presidential candidate and a vice president, right?
Right.
What do you think is their is their best option? I'm inclined to say Andrónico as the most potential to pull votes because he's young and he's I suppose he's easier on the eyes than the aforementioned, the other candidates or the potential candidates, excuse me. I did a little research on the voting demographic in Bolivia, and it's somewhere between a fifth and a quarter of the registered voters are 25, between 18 and 25, which is pretty significant.
Wow.
And also probably no secret that a lot of those voters in that demographic tend to lean left. So if you ask me, I think he'd be if I was in the MAS and I wanted my party to win, I'd put him first. I don't think it unsettles me because he's too young. I don't want any of the MAS potential candidates to win in the election, but I think he'd also be really dangerous just because at that age also how easily he can be influenced and manipulated by those behind the curtain, as we could say, but I know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, definitely there has been this poll done at midweek that came out at midweek, right? And poll came out in this program that is called No Mentiras and PAT, which is a TV channel here in Bolivia. And there were actually 3 different polls undertaken measuring the popularity of different leaders. And one of the polls was Andronico, and he got 18.4% of the favor of the population. Yeah. And in the second poll was included Choquehuanca, and he only got 12.8%, which was under Carlos Mesa in that same poll.
He's the only MAS potential candidate that didn't place first.
Right.
In the different.
Right, that's correct. And then in the third trial, Luis Arce came out as the leader with 13.6. The second one was Camacho, was 11.1. By far, it does seem what you mentioned. By far, there's a big difference between 18% and 12 or 13%. The leader definitely seems to be Andronico. And if I was a Masista, I would definitely vote for Andronico for many reasons. Not only because he's young, he has a very good political discourse.
I was surprised by that. That's a very good point. I've been reading and a lot of the things that have been quoting him, and despite being young, he holds himself well.
Yeah,
all things considered,
he's very good. I mean, if you compare, for example, the political discourse of Arce is pretty bad at that. I think he's just an economist. He can bring facts about the situation in Bolivia. I think he would make a great.
He's like Doria Medina.
He's like Doria Medina. He's a boring. He's a number.
He has no charisma.
But but he's good in a ticket as a vice president because that brings seriousness to the whole thing. He in a way he counterweights what you're saying, because many people will say, well, this Andronico guy, he does have a good political thinking. He has he's a good he does good expositions, but he's too young. But if you put a vice president like Arce Catacora, he's the great counterweight, because they say, well, there's the experience. There's the guy that knows economics. There's the guy that really governed during 14 years. So I think that couple could be a good couple, because Andronico is an indigenous guy from the Chapare, which I think is no small detail. The Chapare has to be present there. Even if we consider that the MAS is very important in the whole of Bolivia, where there are Aymara people and Quechua people, that is true, but the capital of those guys is the Chapare. That's where the more loyalists are located at, and that's where the money comes from, So definitely, I think it's very important for them for them to have a Chapare guy there. And Andronico is perfect because he's young and he has a very good political positions. He has learned a lot throughout the years. And also he studied political science in the university in Cochabamba, which is different from the case of Arce. Arce is an economist, and boring like Samuel Doria Medina, And Choquehuanca, for some strange reason, doesn't get too much of he's the only one that was located second in the poll from the Masistas.
Yep.
It's clear that he shouldn't be part of the ticket, I think. Party, I haven't seen Party in this poll, but I think Party...
His name keeps coming up when they talk about potential candidates.
It is a good name, but I don't think any name would be better than Andronico. I tend to be with you on that point. I don't like them winning, but if you have to choose a leader within the MAS, I think Andronico makes it. But he has to be accompanied by a good vice presidential candidate, somebody that brings more seriousness, more age, more experience. And I think definitely the former Minister of Economics would do that role perfectly there, Mr. Arce. Yeah, let's see what happens, but that's my take. I think that's what is going probably to happen. Let's see. It won't take too much more than 2 months, more than 2 weeks in order to be disclosed, what is going to be the final ticket from the MAS. Yep. But it's interesting, as you can see, in the polls, they're still there. They're not any longer with 50% of the preference, but they're leaders in the preference.
Right.
Yep. They're leaders.
Yeah, they're about half. Yeah, that's, they're definitely going to put up a fight. That's for sure. I don't think, but as you say, there's no strong candidate from any party or from either side, and I think this election is going to be definitely interesting for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
Well, I guess we can. I think we can leave this. We can leave it there for now. I think we've covered pretty well Evo's trip through Mexico and then where he's ended up now in Argentina. We didn't get to talk about the newly elected magistrates for the electoral tribune, but that's a topic in itself, and we can probably discuss that next time.
We should do.
Anything else you want to mention? Or anything I'm leaving out?
I think there are too many things that could be mentioned here. But really, basically, I think we've covered the trip very good. It deserved to be covered because there are too many issues within those trips that had to be covered, and they have. I think we covered them fairly well. The arrest warrant was covered to some extent. And I think that the poll was covered to some extent too, because it's just a poll. It's a very preliminary poll, but it's an idea how Bolivian politics stand as to now. Although the universe, as you mentioned in one of your messages last night, the universe of this poll is just the main big cities, right? La Paz, Cochabamba, and Santa Cruz. It does not include the rural areas of Bolivia, which can probably tilt towards Andronico more, right?
Yeah, the secondary cities like Sucre and Potosí you just mentioned, that in this past election also were, very disputed. Evo won in Potosí and I think Mesa took Chuquisaca. Well, I mean, if we talk about the different departments, but I think, it's like you said, it's a preliminary polling and it didn't take into account the country as a whole, and so there's definitely more to be looked at there. So, right. Alrighty, sir. Well, hey, I enjoyed this, and
this was good. Yeah, thank you very much. We should think about more topics for next week, and we'll be there. We'll be on the microphone.
All right. Until next time, and thanks for listening, everybody.